Welcome to the Enterprise Tuesday, the second event on this Learn Term series. My name is Stelios Kavadias. I'm a faculty member at the Judge Business School, the director of the Entrepreneurship Center, the vice dean for the faculty, and a bunch of other hats within the Judge Business School. But tonight, I'm in the very privileged position to introduce the chair of this event, where the discussion is going to be about money, who has it, and how to raise it. I think that's a problem that most entrepreneurial ventures at some point face, if not all the time. And it's a great pleasure to actually introduce really somebody who is extremely passionate about entrepreneurship and innovation, somebody who I've had the pleasure to work with for 7 full years and creating a bit of the stuff that today stands as the Entrepreneurship Center at the Judge Business School. So it's really my pleasure to welcome Hanadi Jabado, who I guess she, after being the executive director of the Entrepreneurship Center since 2016, now she is really well ingrained into the investing community as an angel investor, as a managing partner at Epione Ventures, and eventually a chairman in several organizations, one of them being the ExSeed Health. So where can I start and how can I contain the description about Hanadi within a few seconds, given that this is my role tonight, before she goes ahead and introduces the rest of our speakers, honorable speakers. She basically has been a name synonymous to the expansion of the Cambridge cluster. She has really worked very, very heavily on the Cambridge cluster, really defined through the Accelerate program back in 2012, 2013, when she set it out based on the Cambridge Judge Business School, a different way of supporting, nurturing, and eventually leading to success many new ventures. And throughout her entire career, she has actually acted as a tech translator, but also somebody with a very strong business acumen and the capacity to align strategy with the operational realities and constraints that many startups face. Apart from that, during her work at the Accelerate Cambridge program, which I had the honor to watch from very, very, very close, she has raised and supported more than 180 early stage ventures, with a combined valuation which runs into the 1.5 billion figure and capital raised in the order of 300 million. So nothing really to shy away from success, right? Since 2019, she has moved, as I said, into the investor sort of, should I say a dream, Hanadi, or the objective that she had, right? Since the early days that I know her. And she was instrumental in creating and then becoming the managing director of CMS Ventures, which actually has been supporting companies in the 4Ds, the drugs, devices, diagnostics, and digital within the healthcare and the life sciences space. So recently, she has actually really has moved into creating a deep tech, or at least being in the process of create a deep tech new venture fund, which is going to be coming live soon. And she has been also working with Innovate UK in their loan credit committee, trying again throughout her entire career, supporting startups and trying to really fund the different ecosystems. She's been very instrumental in cultivating clusters. She's worked in the Middle East, in Russia, in China. And this is why she's been honored about this, both with the Maserati 100 sort of appointment in 2016, as well as the top 20 Asians tech pioneers. When was that? It was 2020 or something, 2019, Hanadi, if I remember correctly, right? In terms of the timeline. Well, she's a tour de force, as the French would say, and she understands that because she speaks French, she speaks Arabic, she comes from Lebanon, she grew up in France, if I'm not mistaken, she speaks another 4 languages. She is really productive in any way you can think, and you can see that when she goes around, glowing with her 4 kids, and at the same time, being somebody who is spending time rowing as of recently, as far as I know, and enjoying it thoroughly within the Kam River. So without further ado, really a pleasure to introduce Hanadi tonight. Passing the baton, I'm going to just go into the shadows as I should and let our speakers and the chair to handle the event. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that you join us in the subsequent events of the Enterprise Tuesday. Thank you, Hanadi. The baton is yours.
Thank you very much, Stelios. Thank you for the glowing introduction. I was not even recognizing myself, so I hope I'm not going to disappoint the participants today. I was delighted to be asked to join today. firstly, because it's a comeback to the business school that I left 3 years ago, as Talia said, as I wanted to move on to the dark side of institutional investment. But the core attraction was the topic. So money. Every single one of you in the audience is probably obsessed about how to fund your startup, how to fund the innovation. And you probably, being in the Cambridge cluster, get a lot of inbound offers. What is the right money to fund your startup? And if you're not lucky to be in the Cambridge cluster and you're outside of there, how can you access the right kind of money? I am privileged to be on a panel with two incredibly diverse gentlemen with two incredibly diverse background, and actually was very humbling path. If I may start with introducing Nathan. Nathan, we're going to forgive him, went to the dark side first. He studied as a physicist at Oxford University, but then he saw the further dark light and moved on to work at Oxford Instruments, first in Germany and then in the UK. He eventually found the light and realized that actually he had to come to Cambridge, and he came to Cambridge to set up QI3. He is also equally passionate about innovation, about commercialization of technology, and this is really the core of all of his work over the years. So he set up QI3, which is here in Cambridge at St. John's Innovation Centre, to help commercialize technology. But he's also a serial entrepreneur, having set up 4 of his own startups. He's also an LP. For those of you who don't know the lingo, VCs, the venture capitalists who invest in startups, every 4 or 5 years have to get their begging bowls out and go and beg for money. And it's people like Nathan, who are LPs, limited partners, who gives them the money. So he's invested in startups directly as an angel investor. I think it's 35 angel investments you have, Nathan. And he's also invested in 3 or 4 venture funds alternatively. And he will, I hope, explain to us why that diversification. He's a member of the Cambridge Angels, which is a prolific, amazing organization that doesn't just invest in startup, it also mentors and builds the ecosystem. And in his spare time, he works with the Research Council, and he is an assessor on large grants for Innovate UK. I'm humbled just, having done that short summary of being on a panel with Nathan. But I have a personal soft spot for our second panelist, Muhunthan. Muhunthan, do you want to wave? People are going to think this is Muhunthan. So Muhunthan is a very successful doctor who, until very recently, devoted his life only to being a senior consultant at Papworth Hospital and to being a dedicated father and an unworthy husband. His wife is a saint, but I can't remember when it was, but about half a decade ago, Muhunthan and his co-founder, Alessandro, stormed the Judge Business School. One was a big helmet coming off his bike, and the other one was flashy shoes. And I'm not going to tell you which one is which. And the two of them, very successful senior doctors at Papworth, decided that they had found a problem and they had the solution to that massive problem. And by the way, how does one get a startup off the ground? And they only had 5 minutes to spare. Could I just give them a crash course in 5 minutes? 5 years later, Qureight, the company that they've co-founded, is a successful sneak out of the Cambridge ecosystem with democratization of access to lung scans, utilizing AI and harnessing the power of technology to actually help people with lung diseases, getting patients better care faster, and helping farmers deliver that better care. These are very short introductions. Muhunthan and Nathan are going to give you better introductions. But just to tell you what an amazing individual Muhunthan is. Muhunthan, in his spare time during COVID, whilst fighting a pandemic, decided that on top of launching a startup and being on the front line of the response, he was also going to vaccinate people. So at the weekends, in the evenings, you would see him volunteering his time vaccinating people. I am really humbled to be on a panel with both Nathan and Muhunthan. Disclaimer, Muhunthan has come with his begging bowl and gotten institutional money from me, and even my personal money as an angel investor. And I sit on the board of Qureight, and I've been the acting chair for 18 months. So there's a lot of connections on the panel today. So Nathan, would you like to give a brief intro to complement what I've missed when I was introducing you?
Gosh, Hanadi, well, I think I'm rather more humbled to be with somebody as illustrious as yourself. I only speak 2 languages, English and German. So anyway, there we are. So it's a nice bunch. So as Hanadi so kindly said, I'm a physicist originally. The first part of my career was at Oxford Instruments, going from being a salesman in Germany to being managing director of Oxford Instruments Cambridge and marketing and strategy for one of the big divisions. Worked in the States a lot, in Japan. And I set up QI3 in Cambridge 22 years ago now. That business specializes in engineering and physical sciences. So maybe a balance to you, and I'm much more on the engineering and physical sciences side. Maybe 2/3 nowadays in the space technology arena, sensors, electronics, novel materials, graphene, things like that, but also space systems and space data. I've done a lot of sweat equity investment. For the last 11 years, I've been investing as an angel investor. I'm also an LP, as Hanadi kindly said, in VC funds. So I want to sort of say a few things about money. And I've done 4 of my own startups. So all of my startups I've bootstrapped. So QI3 I started 22 years ago with my own money in Cambridge. That's been successfully trading since then. I started another business in Cambridge, the name of which is Don't Invest in Your Big Brother. And I lost just under £1 million on that one in 15 months. I'm not that rich, so it took me about 5 years of double mortgages and working like stink to pay off all the debts from that business. I then set up QI3 Ventures 11 years ago, nearly 12 years ago now, in 2010. And then Honest Grapes, my wine business, wine club, which I set up 7.5 years ago and is now just sort of heading towards sort of 10 million turnover, doing quite well. That's London-based. My grandfather, who was a cigarette factory owner in Stamford Hill in North London, used to say there are only 5 ways of getting money for your business. Do you want to trade, sell something and make, get working capital and turn over, sell things, make profit and reinvest that? Do you want to beg, which in his day was going out with a begging bowl? In our day, of course, there's grant funding, particularly people like Innovate UK, research councils, other people who are doing grant funding. Debt, get a loan. So borrow, so trade, beg or borrow. The 4th one, I think we'll probably focus on quite a bit this evening, selling shares in your company. Please don't call it giving shares. It's not a donation. You're exchanging a part of your company for the money coming in from people like me. And then the 5th way, which hopefully he didn't do, and I certainly haven't done, is steal the money. We won't be covering that one. So yeah, he said trade, beg, borrow, sell shares or steal. I'm sure we're going to have quite a heavy emphasis on selling shares as equity. But I think I'd emphasize that trading, bootstrapping, getting working capital moving from selling stuff in a business, borrowing, taking loans, and getting access to grants should be 3 things you do before you consider selling shares in the business, because those first 3 keep full control of the business with you. I'm sure we'll come to that in a lot more detail, along with some investability principles I think we'll get to.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Before we go on to Muhunthan, I love the please don't call it giving shares. There's nothing that annoys me more than people saying I'm ready to give away 25% of my company. So giving or giving away is even worse, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, it's a bad look, and I've got a couple of other thoughts of examples of things people have said to me in the last few weeks. It really looks bad to an angel investor. I don't have mummy's or daddy's money. Everything I've done, I've had to work for. Don't ask me to take your kind donation of shares in response to money that may have taken me years to earn, where it's a commercial exchange and you're selling me shares in return for an investment.
One comment to the audience, not to you, Nathan, just building on a couple of things that you said, and before we move on to Muhunthan. If we were running this as a live event, I would want it to be as interactive as possible, and I would want the audience to interrupt us as they go. Unfortunately, because of the format, it's not possible. However, if there's anything you do not understand at any point, feel free to put it in the Q&A chat box, and Claire and Ollie will definitely flag it to us. We want to be able to address all of your questions. We encourage you to ask questions. Please don't be shy. If you can send your questions the way Claire is instructing you to, I thought it was meant to, through the Q&A, but there's obviously something else to do, which I got wrong. So please do send your questions. So as Nathan was speaking, there were a couple of words that I noted, apart from the giving away the shares, which is sweat equity. Does everybody in the audience know what sweat equity is? And if you don't, just ask the question and we will address it somewhere. And
Hanadi, should I explain it my way? What I mean by sweat equity.
Well, there are a lot of people who don't know what I'm looking at the chat box, so please do.
In the part of my career, which is now more than 11 years ago, I've been providing support and advice and consultancy to a lot of businesses. Fortunately, that's done very well. So I've got more money than time, which is a very nice position to be in. But I really want to help young businesses get started. And so sometimes people need help, but they can't afford it to pay it at a consultancy rate, or I don't want to be a director of everything or whatever. So sweat equity is where I say, I'll give you some help. I might be helping you develop the business, helping you get grants, helping you to sell things, helping you with introductions. But instead of taking payment for it in cash, I'll take a part of the equity of the business. So a small shareholding. Nowadays, that could also be not strictly sweat equity, but you could use the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, SEIS, to advantage somebody who's a very early stage investor in the business and give them some extra shareholding for their hard work through that. We're all nice people, but don't expect the support necessarily for nothing forever. I'm always happy to give people an hour or two, but when it's over 12 months and it's a long time and I'm really helping people a lot, my sweat should be rewarded with a bit of equity, either through SEIS or perhaps as share options or something like that.
Thank you ever so much, Nathan. So that's a great example of what sweat equity is. And definitely a lot of people didn't know what sweat equity was. So if there is another word that you come across, or anything that any of us say that either you disagree with or you agree with, please fire it, and we will try and address it at the end of the session. We can't address it throughout because of the recording. The other word that you used, Nathan, was bootstrapping. You did explain it by, the trading capital. There are other, there's a wider one, and we can address it later on, but please don't be shy. I see in the chat box that a couple of people have actually introduced themselves. Feel free to do that because it's a great way for each one of you to network as well. Nathan, we're going to pass on the mic to Muhunthan. Muhunthan, would you mind please introducing yourself briefly and explain to everyone how you take advantage of lovely people like me and don't give them sweat equity?
Yeah, we don't believe it's running into Qureight. Thanks, Hanadi. So I was thinking when you talked about my wife, and I think there have been 3 points where she's actually let me do what I want to do. And so for those of you entrepreneurs and have partners, you'll know what I mean. So the first time was when I was a junior doctor in Oxford, and we met and we were engaged, and I said I wanted to go to London and do research. So we ended up in London, spent 4 years in a research lab doing a PhD in immunology. And so she wasn't massively happy, but we got married and our son was born. And the second time, I was supposed to get a job in London as a consultant, but I decided at the last minute to look for a job in Cambridge for some reason because I'd had enough of London. So I remember this vivid argument. She won't be mind saying this about the decision to move to Cambridge versus London. So that was a big decision. And then the third time was more recently with Qureight, because as you said, I'm a hospital doctor, and until very recently with my co-founder Alessandro, we were full-time doctors. I'm a lung specialist, so I do lung diseases. So COVID's been an interesting time, but I particularly specialize in forms of complex lung diseases. And Alessandro, my co-founder, is an imaging doctor, a radiologist, and until very recently we were full-time doctors. But having taken on some funding, we've radically dropped our hospital commitments and are now almost full-time in Qureight. So that only happened 2 or 3 months ago, and we've started to build the company. We've gone from just the 2 of us. We now have, I think, 11 or 12 full-time employees. We have a board consisting of 2 investment directors, so Hanadi's one, and somebody from second London in London called Playfair has come on board, and we have a non-executive director as well, so 5 of us on the board. So now, having gone from just 2 of us, we have a board and a company of people and have a responsibility to the investors because we've taken their money. So it's been a very interesting journey. This is only the start of the journey, but it'd be great to share any insights, good and bad, about raising money and what we've done so far.
Thank you very much, Muhunthan. Maybe I can start by asking you, Muhunthan, a question, given that you've stressed the importance of having a board. Or maybe you haven't, you're just saying we have a board, but you mentioned it and you described your board. Is it important to have a board when you're raising money?
I think it depends on how much money you're raising. If you're raising a couple of 100 million, then you probably need a board. I think at the very early stages, it may not be so vital. I think what's really vital is that you have a structure of governance in place. Even if it's just you and your co-founders or your 2 or 3 co-founders, you really have to understand when going for money, as Nathan said, what money you're looking for, how are you not giving away, but how are you trading the money for equity, and you really have to have a proper process in place to do that. I don't think you necessarily need a board at the very beginning stages, but you do need to understand why you're looking for money and what you're going to do with the money.
Nathan, do you think that it's important to have a board at the early stage when you're raising money?
I distinguish between the first and the second stage. If you're right at that formative sort of stage of a business, it's not that important, but it becomes important by the next stage. And I do think separating the role of the chief executive who's running the business from the chairman or whatever who's helping to deal with shareholders and raise money becomes more important when you're going to the next stage up. In terms of making any investment, though, I've got 6 very strong principles of sort of my tick list of what I need to see from a business to invest in, and it always goes in the same order. And it starts with a slightly different answer to the question of do you need a board? You need a credible team that can deliver the business plan. That's not the same as do you need a board? It's being able to say, do you have people who can develop things, people who can build things, people who can sell them, and people who can count the beans? You know, you've got basic functions in a business that need to be covered. That's my first investment principle. And I look very carefully. The more I've invested over the years, the more I've realized that even though I'm a technology freak, even the very best novel technologies can get absolutely squashed and killed by having a team that can't engineer its way out of the paper bag. But having a good team with a moderate technology can often yield a really successful business and a good exit. So no, you don't need a board, but you do need a team that can deliver the business plan.
Brilliant. So Muhunthan, you just told us that you've closed a round recently, and so you've raised some money. So who has the money?
That's a really interesting question. I guess Nathan has the money, so we'll send him our bank details later. I think it might be right to say there's a lot of money around at the moment, or perhaps there is compared to a year or two ago for a variety of reasons, especially in medtech. And there are different sources of money. So we have not raised grant money. We have some small grants from the University of Cambridge and the European Union, but we haven't gone for any big grants. We haven't raised any debt. We've gone out and looked for money from institutional investors, so venture capital firms and angel investors. And it's about finding the right kind of money. And I think this becomes more important the further along your business is. It's very easy to say, I'm running out of money, which we did at the very beginning. In the early days, we need some money. And then at some point you have to think, well, we do need some money, but who do we need that money from and what strings does it come with? And we've chosen to go for, as I said, institutional investors, so venture capital firms based in London, in Cambridge, and overseas. And that's who we've taken money from. But there are lots of sources of money at the moment. And I think you have to be very strategic about what you want the money for before just going out and simply asking for money. It's very easy to send hundreds of emails and have hundreds of meetings without a really clear strategy as to what you want the money for and who you want it from.
So could you give us, a lot of questions about, a lot of mentions about institutional investors and angel investors. Great. Where do I find those institutional investors and those angel investors? I'm going to ask you, Muhunthan, where did you find those institutional investors? Where did you find those angel investors?
Well, the angel investors were easy in a way because we were in Cambridge. There are lots of, as Nathan is, lots of angels in Cambridge. There's in fact a couple of angel networks. So we have investment from 6 angels at the moment who are all part of the Cambridge Angel Network. So we were lucky. If you don't live in Cambridge or a tech city, that might be slightly harder. But you'll always find angel networks in and around your area. So those are angels. We went and pitched. We were on the accelerator at the Judge Business School, and we gave lots of pitches. We talked a lot about what we were trying to build and the platform technology we were trying to build. And the important thing about angel investors is really just finding people who are passionate. So we found early on, a couple of years ago, an angel called Simon Thorpe in Cambridge, who was very passionate about us. And he invested his own money in the company early and then went and spoke to lots of angels. And so at the last round, he gathered angels together and actually managed to bring some on board. So we were very lucky. Institutional investors are harder. You can go to the website and send them decks and pitches, but probably Nathan can probably answer this clearly. If we'd sent you in one of your VC funds a pitch, would you have looked at it? Would you be interested? We always get told that warm introductions are so much better than cold calls because we've had lots of cold calls, but the money that we got came from warm introductions, a VC introducing another VC and a group of them getting together and saying right now is the right time to invest in Qureight.
Thank you very much, Muhunthan. So just because, just to capture what Muhunthan said, hanging out in the right places, and in his case, the right place was Oxford, Cambridge, allowed him to meet some really interesting angel investors. And in terms of the institutional investors, cold calling didn't work. However, having warm introductions really helped. Nathan, what do you think? Cold calling or not cold calling?
I mean, the short answer is generally not cold calling, but actually, Muhunthan, you've exposed several different facets here which are interlinked. So forgive me if I sort of try and disaggregate them a bit. The first thing is the type of money and the arc of investment and the type of help you want. So let's just go through those. The type of money we are talking about, are you having funds which are coming from individuals that we call business angels? There are then venture funds who are funds which are managing an aggregate, a pool of money on behalf of limited partners like myself. So I work in both of those modes. But also you get organizations of individuals in between the two that you might call family offices or super angels, perhaps. So generally people who have got a higher net worth and are able to write bigger checks themselves, or have got inherited wealth where they have the team or somebody working within their team who can do investment analysis So they behave more like a professional VC, even though they're managing a single person or single family's money. So it is a bit complex, but the way to look at it if you're trying to fundraise is what looks most appropriate for you, for the money, not just that you need now, but that you will need for 2 or 3 or 4 rounds to take you to some kind of liquidity event, a sale, for example, or if you believe that you might IPO, trade on the stock exchange, that sort of event. So don't just choose people who've got the money that you need now. Think about, will they be useful for you in the next round? And that's not just their money, it's also their connections. And so while we were sort of joking earlier, Muhunthan, about sweat equity, actually I've found I've stepped down from a lot of boards and things because a lot of the help I can give to people comes from making business introductions for them rather than turning up to board meetings. So actually it's much more useful for me not to waste my time sitting on board minutes and stuff and just open doors for people. So choosing the type of money you need, choosing the type of help you need, and choosing the right, what I call the investment arc, that not just today's round, but the next round and the one beyond that. Having that bit of foresight helps you to look at the landscape. Now moving on to how to get through the door. Now look at it from my perspective. Okay, I'm a private investor. I often have an intern as an investment analyst because I've got a bigger portfolio now and operating businesses as well, so a bit more complex. I get about 1,000 people a year, about 1,000 approaches a year, about 5 every working day, of people saying, Nathan, you know, and Hanadi said, oh, well, Nathan's got money, yeah, brilliant, okay, got some money to invest, but out of those 1,000, think about it if it were you. Of those 1,000, about 920 or 930 are ones which aren't well enough presented. I don't understand, it's a cold approach. There's something there, they're asking for me to invest in something I just don't understand at all. I can't deal with 1,000 approaches a year. I just have to either ignore it, which I find quite rude, but I don't always have enough time to reply to everybody. But I do try otherwise to do a personal reply and signpost people to somebody else who might be more interesting. Might be more interested in them. That brings me down then to about 1 or 2 a week maximum, maybe a maximum of 100 in a year, but usually a bit less, 60 or 70, which I'll actually take a meeting with. And I make about 4 fresh investments a year as an angel. I try to do at 3 or 4, something like that. I might also, if I'm interested, but it's not my field, might refer you to people within one of the venture funds where I'm a limited partner, or indeed through Cambridge Angels or the guys in London who I know will link you to a business angel network if I think that they might be more suitable. So the way to do that is try it to be respectful of people's time, because you are one of 1,000 to begin with. Don't expect that you know what I want to invest in. Just give me the approach. And then if you get, I'm not trying to be, you know, high and mighty or something, but try and get something that makes me want to help you a bit, because I'm trying to be helpful. So I'll take a meeting if I really think it's worth coming into my pipeline, or do my best to refer you to somebody else. And Muhunthan, I'm so pleased you've got 5 Cambridge Angels involved in your business. I think you said it was 5, because medtech, I've only made 3 investments so far. I'm actually looking at a 4th one in medical technology, but you know, I'm a physicist. I don't understand all these long words. I tend to only invest in medical technology if somebody else is leading and I get a good feeling about the team. So for those of you who are in this call who are thinking, where do I start? I would actually start with the networking bit. So I'd go along to some of those events where you get the chance to do a poster or present your pitch. Try and get introduced to Cambridge Angels if you're Cambridge based, through the Cambridge Angels informal system. We will accept, not me personally who runs it, but we will accept cold approaches and bring them through an informal process before you come to the formal pitches, because basically there you're trading on your locality, trying to build up some connections, but be sort of respectful about it. Try, you know, don't pester people. It's people, if they're interested, they will get engaged with you. I appreciate that was quite a long answer, but it was quite a complicated question actually, with several parts to it.
No, it's brilliant, Nathan. I think that we Just a couple of points on your answer, which was actually very structured. So even if long, actually very helpful because very structured. One is a shameless plug for the next Enterprise Tuesday. You said go to events where you can have a poster, where you can have exposure. The next Enterprise Tuesday on the 22nd is called Pitch It. And some companies are going to be pitching and giving their elevator pitch. Good practice for them, but also good practice for the audience. So if you're not doing anything next week, please do join Claire and the team at the next Enterprise Tuesday. Really good lesson to listen to other people pitch, because it's so much easier to critique other people than to critique yourself. You can see all the mistakes they're making, and hopefully you will not make those mistakes yourself. You also can be pleasantly surprised and be wowed by some of their techniques and try it for size yourself. So please do and do listen in. The second one is want to maybe violently disagree with my esteemed panelist on wasting time on board minutes. So I have been whipping every single company I sit on about governance and getting a board. And maybe let me just clarify and mansplain Nathan elegantly, and rather than vehemently disagreeing with him. Sorry, Nathan. Governance is really important to me. So there are two types of boards that you can have. You can have purely reporting boards, where actually it's a big toll on the founding team who actually need to be getting on and running the business. And if it's only reading the board minutes, Nathan is right. This is not where people add value. And I've actually run away from being, a coward, run away from a couple of boards that were, purely reporting. What is interesting is to have a strategic board, and to have people who are on that board, who are supporting the team. And rather than demanding, being lazy and demanding, incredibly comprehensive reports and getting the poor chief exec to read the minutes, they actually are there. They've come, they've done their homework, they've read the report, and they come prepared with questions, with suggestions, with introductions. And there's a lot of chemistry that happens. So, like Nathan, I don't want to waste time on board minutes. Do I, Muhunthan? But oftentimes it's about strategy, and having a board that is made out of really good investment directors and non-executive directors allow you to have that strategic. Muhunthan, can people bring you something else than money? So if Nathan had money right now, would he transfer the money or write you a check? Actually, Nathan, how loose are you with your check? If I asked you for a check right now, how hard would it be to get one?
It's pretty damn difficult. As an investor, you do spend more of your time saying no than yes. And every time, the last 3 years, I've had more successful exits than haven't had any failed investments for 3 years, but I've just had one this morning. So you learn from each mistake, you learn from each success, and you don't do things in a hurry as an investor.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, go ahead.
Just to answer your point and something that Nathan said earlier, absolutely, people at any stage, but especially at a relatively early stage like us, are just as important, sometimes more important than money. So to give you a couple of examples of the angels who invested in us, one of them is a gentleman called John Schneider. So he's a tech person. He's not a med tech person, but he's a tech person. And we had a long chat at the meeting with him about a difficulty we were having with a particular pharma client, a strategic decision. Should we spend more time with this one client, or should we cut our losses and go somewhere else? And he gave us some fantastic advice from his understanding of clients in the tech world. Now, we wouldn't have got that from an institutional investor, perhaps, but we got that from an angel who understood the sorts of things we were trying to do, understood customer engagement, understood tech. So absolutely people are important, but even on the VC side, when we closed our round, we potentially could have raised more money than we set out to do. So we had to make some decisions as to who to take money from. And as you said, Nathan, there were a couple of important facts. First of all, and this sounds a bit crazy in this day and age, did we like the people? You know, we had to work with these VCs for potentially a long time, or at least until the next funding round, when we can redo the board, had a thing. But we have to work with these. So it's really important we like them. Secondly, do they understand the space? Do they understand pharma or tech? And then thirdly, do they bring in something in addition to the money? Do they bring in the connections? Do they have access to bigger funds or more strategic collaborations that we don't have? So I think there are lots of factors in choosing who to work with if you're lucky enough to have investment on the table, rather than just the money itself, because there are many things that investors can do that we're finding, as opposed to just writing those checks.
Sorry, I was on mute. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Muhunthan. Still, starting with you, Muhunthan, and giving Nathan some time to think about the answers to the next question. Muhunthan, what is the biggest mistake you have done raising money for Qureight? Give us, one of the worst mistakes you've made, the most embarrassing. What is still, keeping you awake at night, if anything? And Nathan, can you think of big mistakes that you've seen in people raising money?
So I don't think we've had any big mistakes yet. I'm sure we will do. We've had lots and lots of little mistakes. So to give people clear answers, everybody in the investment world in the UK, I guess, in the medtech space, knows each other. So you have to be very careful what you say to people. And we've gone to meetings where we've said something somebody said, well, that's not exactly what you said to investor X. And you think in your head really quickly, how do they know investor X in a different part of the country, a different thing? And you have to be very careful about what you say and to who, because people make notes and they talk to each other. So that's really important. We've had lots of timing issues with Zoom. We've spoken to investors in the US and investors in Japan, and times have been completely chaotic. And before we had office administrators, Alessandra and I ran all our meetings through Zoom, and our calendars were very chaotic. So that was a problem. So it's really important to get that right. I don't think we've had any major embarrassments so far, but I'm absolutely sure we will do in the next couple of years.
What about insulting your investment director before the first board meeting ever?
Did I do that? I might have done that. We have had some, we have had some challenging meetings with investors. Obviously, I'm not going to name any names, but investors are people like us, and in general, they're all very friendly. But we have had some very difficult investment meetings as well. But that's something you'll get to if you start pitching.
Thank you, Muhunthan. Nathan, any stories?
Gosh, in pitches people have made to me. Well, last week I had a pitch from somebody who at the end of the pitch, this was a pitch to a group, at the end of the pitch, they said they needed, they're trying to raise £500,000 for their business. And right at the end, it was a really good presentation. And right at the end, they said, we need your commitment by next week, by Wednesday next week, and the money at the end of the week. And that's a really bad look, because it really put me off. I'm a considered investor. I like to have time to think things through, do my due diligence. And so it immediately raises loads of red flags about, are they desperate? Are they naive? Are they stupid? Be realistic. If it was your money, would you cough up that quickly? Don't lie or come across as shady. If you can't answer something, just say you can't answer it yet. Again, it's a human thing. Particularly with things like intellectual property, people go into incredible contortions about asking for non-disclosure agreements and things. I don't often need to know please don't tell me anything confidential in the first few meetings. I don't want it. I'm just trying to understand whether I want to deep dive. So, don't get all secret squirrel. Just give the outline, give the business motivation for the technology rather than the nuts and bolts of why it works, because otherwise you come across as being secretive and shady, and it's just not necessary. And then the third thing, I think very specific to the university spin-outs and academic spin-outs, obviously, which I deal with a lot. When I said earlier about the right team, don't just think because you're a great academic or because you're the guy or lady who came up with the idea and the technology, and it's your name on the patents or the research the research grants, that you're the right person to be the CEO. And don't be ashamed if it's not you. It's very often better, probably the majority of the cases, it's better to get a really good business person around you to act in that sort of leadership role, and for you to be the chief scientific officer, the chief technology officer, or indeed just to stay in the university, do your research, and be and have shares in the business. So I think all of us respect that, and people like me have been dealing with novel technologies for many, many years. So those are sort of three things. Actually, there was one only a few weeks ago that I had to turn down, just because the academic who is CEO, I just know he's not going to be the CEO in a year's time, and it's just silly. And he's got it so close in his head. His ownership of the startup is the same as his great research skills. They're just not the same skills. So be humble about that and just sort of think. Anyway, there you are. There's three specifics. Don't lie or be shady, particularly sort of IP, secret skill. Know your place in terms of where you are in the business. And please don't tell me you want £100,000 of my money by next Friday. It takes a surgical operation to remove that sort of money from me nowadays. So you'd have to be on to me, Muhunthan.
Actually, just back to that question. So when you see all these really clever people, and I guess some of the people on the call today have clever technologies, is it very clear to you at the very beginning that these are the right people, or that these are not the right people? If as long as you believe in the tech, is it very easy for you to say you guys are the right team, or you guys have the right product, but you are definitely not the right team to lead this?
It's not always immediately clear, and I'd say that's because I'm soft. I believe in the greatness of people and the ability of people to meld themselves and take advantage of opportunities. So I do think I sometimes have to adapt to thinking, can this team that's presented in front of me really hack it in terms of what they have to do? And to be honest, it's only by experience of having seen some things succeed and other things fail that I get a little bit more, not ruthless, but just more determined of saying, are you really sure you've got the right people? If I may, Hanadi, can I give my 6 investment principles now? So I've got them so people can make a note, because they're really quite short. The first one is, can a team deliver the business plan? And the team in front of me deliver that business plan. So that's what I revert to, okay? It's that metric. The second one is, are they in an exciting market that's growing, that's global, particularly in technology terms? Are they in a space that's growing? Much easier to grow a business in an area that's growing itself. My third metric is the value proposition. Do you have something that's going to disrupt the market and irritate competitors, give you a leadership position? My fourth one is IP or moat, defensibility. Do you have something that stops everybody else coming in and just doing the same as you, just following your example and beating you? The fifth one is the business model, which is the intricacies of how you turn your idea into working capital, into cash and profit. Are you doing a software as a service proposition? Are you selling a hardware product? What's the model by which revenue turns into profit? And then the sixth one is the investment proposition. How are you showing me not just that you're going to make money, but that you're going to return a good investment return to me? And I follow those 6 principles religiously and in that order. And I found them very helpful, both in my assessment of companies as to whether they sort of match up with the sort of things that I need to see to invest in a business. They don't all have to be perfect on day one, but they've got to sort of be going in the right direction. But I hope they're also useful to the people who are participating in this call to think, in my 10-minute pitch, have I covered those 6 things off to some level?
Thank you very much, Nathan. It was one of the questions in the chat box. Could you tell us about your investment principles? So thank you for jumping on that. And also thank you for talking about the pitfalls. I mean, what you were describing seems to be common sense. And it seems that a lot of people are missing a lot of common sense. On your investment principles, I would say to the audience, each investor will have their own checklist. Do not waste your time being everybody behind the screen today wanting to raise money. Do not waste your time and knock at the door of an investor who will not consider you because you do not meet their investment criteria. It sounds like common sense. You would be surprised at my LinkedIn inbox. LinkedIn doesn't work for me anymore because a lot of people are contacting me who have not understood my investment criteria. And each investor will have a very, very different there will be commonalities, but they will have a different investment criteria. So do your research, do not waste your time. And I'm not talking about my time or Nathan's time. We're grown-ups. We are completely capable of managing our time, but your time reaching out to the wrong investors. There are, talking about time management, there are some really good questions in the chat that I've been monitoring. So I'm really keen to move on to the chat as soon as we can. I have one last question for the two of you, Muhunthan and Nathan. And I was wondering if you wanted to ask each other a question before we went to the chat. But let's go with my question first. This is about raising money. And the title was Who Has the Money and How to Raise Money. But there is another question, which is when to raise money. So Muhunthan, when is the best time to raise money?
The best time to raise money, from our point of view, is when you don't need to raise money. And I know you hear this again and again, but it's very dangerous to get to the end of a runway, as we've seen a couple of times, get close to the end of a runway and need money because then your back's up against the wall. We, having just raised money, now have lots of potential introductions with larger funds, and we're trying to be strategic and work out, should we take these calls, should we have these meetings? And we're in a privileged position now that we don't need to raise money, but at some point we will. So I think you have to be strategic. These things take a very long time, and the more money you raise, the longer it takes. Or conversely, as someone told me the other day, perhaps the more money you raise, the quicker it is. I don't know, but it takes a long time to raise money, especially from new investors. And you have to be very, very strategic and have a very long game plan. 6 months, 9 months, for example, is roughly the right amount of time in the medtech space where you have to get money. So I think the short answer is raise money when you don't need it, but try not to get to the very, very end.
Thank you. Nathan?
I got very little to add. I think Muhunthan said it. I do think, in slight contrast to what you said, Muhunthan, about not getting grant funding, I think in my area of deep tech and physical sciences, but surely in medtech as well, grant money is good leverage. There's an element of due diligence and competitiveness to achieving it, but also for investors, it means that their money goes further and is somewhat de-risked in terms of the sheer amount of money and personnel and time needed to actually get technology off the ground. So for me, I'd go back to what types of money I have to raise, as well as when I need it. But certainly, as you said, Muhunthan, being at the end of the, breathing fumes at the end, running on your last few pounds is not a good place to be in when you're trying to raise money, because people will take, I'd say sort of 3 months to 9 months, depending on who it is and how process oriented they are.
And to give you a quick example, when we raised our first amount of money, small amount of money, Alessandra and I had some money from some pharma deals, but we ended up having to pay our first employee out of our own money because we didn't have money at that stage. And that's okay when you're a small company, but when you get bigger and bigger and you have a very big number of people to pay, you don't want to get to the very end and run out.
Mm. As well, just a little warning thing, again, for first-time entrepreneurs. And it's only just a warning thing. It's not to put you off from having a salary at all. But, people often talk about sort of friends, family, and fools, or that very first pre-seed bit of just getting an idea off the ground. It's quite helpful to show investors that you are prepared to use your own money and your own network and your own salary sacrifice to actually get started. And conversely, I've seen some really bad pitches where people put in quite a high salary for themselves and from the beginning, and you're sort of thinking as an investor, I want people to have food on the table to live. I'm not that mean, okay? I want you to live and have your family and be able to eat and travel and whatever. But equally, at this early stage, you should be taking a modest salary that allows you to live, rather than the sort of if you're later stage, people in your careers, than the executive salary that you were on in your last highly paid job, because it's not a good look. There needs to be a sort of fairness there.
I'm so pleased this is recorded, Nathan. I might actually just use that clip over and over again when people are trying to pitch to me that they should be paid that 5-figure salary, because did I know how much they were paid in their previous job? So I can tell them I'm not the meanie. Other people are out there with the same. So did you have any question for each other before we move on to the questions from the audience?
My only question is a sort of generic one. It's not about where you raise money from, but you've obviously made a lot of investments, Nathan. Have you ever invested in a team that you don't like? You love the technology, love the product, the market fit, but you don't actually like the individuals that are pitching to you. Can you get over that as an investor, or is that a big barrier to you investing?
It's an impossible barrier to get over, and I've regretted it every time. Right, so I have in the past invested because mates were investing, or because the technology looked good, but I wasn't that convinced about the people. And every single time, it's, you know, in the end, you know, I'm usually investing in unquoted equities for, you know, 5, 6, 8, 10 years, or maybe even more eventually. And so even if they're not going to be bosom buddies, they've at least got to be people you respect, and who will see that their job running their business is to grow the business and to return money to investors. Just as an aside, by the way, there are quite a few people who treat your money as an interest-free loan that they never intend to repay. And that's despicable, actually, because unless I make a return, it's my pension plan. I'm not that filthy rich I can afford to give the money away. And what we call zombies, you know, they exist as a business, but they provide a lifestyle for the management, but there's no real intention to return it. It means not only has it undermined my investment criteria, it also means I can't reinvest the money in the next business. So yeah, I find that quite despicable, actually. Your job is to run your business and return money to the people who've invested in you. So yeah, don't invest in people you don't like.
Nathan, any final question for Muhunthan?
Yeah, Muhunthan, actually, you know, I've been a member of Cambridge Angels for 10 years myself. As I've said, I'm generally not a medtech investor. Well, I might be about to make the third mistake for the 4th time. None of them have been great investments for me, the 3 I've done so far. So maybe if you'd like to comment on your perception, or just talk about your own business and why your business is going to be a great investment for the 5 Cambridge Angels and everybody else who's been in there. Who's not me, unfortunately.
So I think in 30 seconds, 3 years ago, Alessandra and I started the company. We were looking at patients with complex diseases. So our first disease is called IPF, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. It's a scarring disease. And on an individual patient basis, if I treat a patient with IPF and give them one of these billion-dollar blockbuster drugs, it's very difficult for me to work out if that patient's responding to a drug or not, if that patient's getting better or not, because the metrics we use for disease progression, these complex diseases, are very, very difficult. If it's hard enough for me as a doctor, if I was a pharmaceutical company making the next billion-dollar drug in this disease, I'd find it very, very hard to look at these metrics. So we created a type of platform technology that uses AI to bring together complex data sets, data from healthcare, data from pharma trials, and we build machine learning models, and we filed a couple of patents, and we do things like look at structures of the lungs and the heart and other parts of the body. We tag them with biomarkers, and we really try to understand from these really big data sets whether patients are getting better or worse and whether drugs are working or not. So that's quite satisfying from an individual point of view. Rather than treating a single patient for the next 30 years of my life, we're developing tools that could potentially create the next generation of drugs to help thousands and thousands of patients and stop us squandering billions of drugs on these very expensive diseases. So the sort of proposition is we're building lots of data, we're building some really cool tools, and if you come and invest in us, we'll bring you on this journey with us.
Cool pitch, thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. We are going to move on to questions from the audience, and they're very prolific. So I'm going to try and choose the ones. I'm hoping we're going to have time to answer them all. I am going to start maybe with one that was sent in the wrong chat, and to Veronica. Veronica is asking, re the salaries for founders, roughly speaking, is there a threshold for that? And I'm going to ask that question to both of you. So from the founder's perspective and also from the investor perspective, it's one that never ceases to amuse me. So Nathan, do you want to go first?
Gosh, look, I've been founder and mostly nowadays an investor as well. I think it's more a question of, does it feel like the salary that you can live on for the next couple of years or whatever it is of this funding round, rather than referencing your previous highly paid job or whatever. You need to feel. I don't want people to suffer. I want people to suffer and not be able to put food on the table. But it's really terribly. It's a terrible conversation to have with a founding team, where your money as an investor is going into what feels like salaries that are too toppy. If you wanted to do it properly, I'm not going to give you the answer of a particular number, Veronica. Sorry, but I just say, why don't you just do a bit of research as to what the going rate for the non-management job is in your field in Cambridge or London or wherever you happen to be, and just say, does that sound right? Does it sound defensible?
Thank you very much, Nathan. Muhunthan, would you mind answering it from your founder's perspective?
It's a really easy answer from our point of view. So everybody wants money. We want lots of salaries. That's straightforward. But there are two reasons why Alessandra, my co-founder, I don't think pay us massive salaries. And one's a sort of perception issue, and one's a strategic issue. The perception issue to the investors is we're building a team. We have equity in this company. And in order for the company to be successful and one day pay us out a huge amount of money, we can't drain big salaries. The second thing is, as a tech team, and those of you in the tech industry know, tech people are very, very expensive. And so we would personally prefer to move some of our own potential salaries into salaries of tech people. That's not to say we don't get paid well, we do, but our tech people, we hope, get paid at the market rate. And by investing money into team salaries, we're really going to give our business the best chance of growing at this early stage.
Yeah, I should add, Hanadi, very directly, I'm very used to the top salesperson, the top software engineers, the AI people, earning much more than the CEO. The CEO is standing at the bottom of the pyramid, not the top of it.
And that's really important. 12 people, I am definitely not the most highly paid person in Qureight, despite being the CEO, which is interesting.
It's the ultimate sweat equity being a founder. You're putting your time and 24/7, 365 to get your business off the ground, and you're hopefully keeping a sizable shareholding and a big swatch of the outcome. So that is money tomorrow, not today.
And just Veronica, remember that when you are going for a high salary, you are basically burning your own shares. You're burning your own equity. You have to sell more and more shares today to fund your lifestyle today, which when you exit, is going to be something you will regret, and you'll regret dearly. So my favorite story is when I arrived in Cambridge in 1995. I was lucky enough to meet some amazing tech people, and there was this young man who started a tech company, and he had an amazing idea, and he had a third of the company. His tech co-founder had a third of the company, and the business angel who funded it had a third of the company. And this young man, who was a PhD student, had a very expensive lifestyle, and he wanted the salary, the company car, the expensive dinners, the lifestyle. And the angel never, ever said no. But when they sold the company 5 years later, this young man had 1% of the company left, and the company sold for $500 million. You do the maths. So moving on, I hope that is sobering thought, and maybe less polite than what Nathan and Muhunthan were getting at. Let's move on to another question, which is from Ryan. Ryan is saying, how important is geography for raising capital? If you're a proven entrepreneur with a successful exit, do investors still want to live near you? I think that there are two questions in this, which is, the first one is, when you're starting up, he's assuming that investors want to be close to you and use the bicycle ride rule. And then, but if you are a successful proven entrepreneur, does this bicycle rule still apply? So Nathan, question to you, do you still invest according to the bicycle rule in early stage? And at later stage, does this bicycle rule still apply?
The answer the answer is simply geography doesn't matter that much to me. I think the pandemic has also made a lot of difference because we're more used to meeting people on Zoom and not just trundling around to the lab to see the technology. So I'm actually looking at a piece of quite advanced materials technology at the moment, and I'm doing that all with sort of 3D rendering drawings and Zoom because the people are in another country. It does matter to me that people are in the UK if I'm using the Enterprise Investment Scheme, EIS, or the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, SEIS, because those are tax breaks that we don't have time to go into today, but they are about how you structure your company, your shareholding, and the tax incentive to investors. So I will invest more in UK companies. I'm more interested in UK companies when I'm using those tax breaks, but about 2/3 of my investments use those tax breaks and 1/3 of them don't. So it's not all about the geography. I see, Ryan, you've also asked the question, what are your thoughts on growing a software tech company remotely? Again, I'm not too bothered. I'm more interested in whether you can deliver the business plan. I think let's not go into the sort of psychology or sociology of software engineers, but I think it's important a company has a heart. Certainly the companies I run, we've done a lot to try and make them retain cohesiveness and team performance during the pandemic, even though they've been working remotely. So I'm more interested in seeing the cohesiveness and the overperformance of the team than really whether they're communicating on Slack or Microsoft Teams or Zoom or sitting in the same room.
Great. Muhunthan, would you like to answer this question as well? The second bit, not the first one, your thoughts about growing a software tech company remotely, because this is what you're doing at the moment.
This is what we're doing. So we have a hybrid model. We have a really lovely office in central Cambridge, but people will come and go. So at the moment, when we're figuring this out, we have 2 days during the week. We try and get most of the tech team there, but we have a software engineer in Hull. We have an ML person in Birmingham. We have a data scientist and another ML person in London. We were looking at a CV from a really amazing person in Singapore last week, thinking, is this possible? Maybe. So I think, as Nathan said, our heart for our company is in Cambridge, and I hope always will be. And that's a great landing place for people to come physically and meet. But if you're building a software company, you may potentially find that people are more productive at home in front of their screen rather than traveling into Cambridge. And so it's that really difficult thing. If we want to see people, we want to build a team, we want them in the room together for a whiteboarding session for the tech team, for example, versus they need to just get on with it and do the work. And so we have regular catch-ups during the day. We have meetings at the beginning and the end of the week just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But absolutely, it's definitely possible to build a software team remotely if you want to.
I guess, Muhunthan, you must have to have performance measures as well to make sure that people aren't hiding behind the screen and not performing.
We do. So Alessandra and I are doctors. Luckily, Darren, Gallagher, who was our CTO, is hugely experienced. He's had 20 years at Hewlett Packard building platform technology. So he completely runs the tech meetings and has appraisals and very clear goals for every person. So you're right. Without that, we'd be floundering, I think.
So thank you very much both for those answers. I would like to move on to a question by somebody who's anonymous, so a shy person. Should you work out your own valuation before going to investors? And so what is the most logical, acceptable method? I'm going to let you, Nathan, answer that one.
I actually wrote a couple of notes on this because valuation is such a fraught subject, and we could spend an hour talking about it. If I'm going to assume that you're either at the very formative stage or just beyond that, because I just can't answer the whole question. Please don't spend so much time worrying about valuation. You get into terrible discussions with people who, from my perspective, all you've got is some PowerPoint, and you're talking about developing a minimum viable product or proof of concept or something. You don't have the things that are business. I can't invest in you the way I invest in a business on the stock exchange. And I invest a lot on listed equities as well. Technology businesses in the UK and the US and Europe in particular. So valuation is really difficult. And so many people get into this mode of expecting a really high valuation at an early stage. And I say, my motto is we're in this to bake a cake together, not a souffle. If you have a high valuation at a too early a stage, it's going to get flatter, like a souffle deflating, okay, as you go to the next round, because it's really hard to keep proving an increase in valuation every time. Value that early stage money. Realize that people like me, I haven't got time to go through my whole investment history, but the ones that make money for me are the ones that return 10 times, 30 times their money. I've got so many that go to zero because it's risky, or zombie around and might return something one day. I need to buy the shares when they feel cheap and sell them when they feel expensive. And it's the same for you as a founder. You should be aligned with me on that. One of my best investments was in not in physics tech, but in nutraceuticals, chemistry, where we invested, 4 of us, 3 from Cambridge Angels actually, invested in a business with a valuation of 600,000 or 700,000 at the beginning, and we sold it for 23 million at the exit about 6 years later. The founders still own the majority of the shares. We backed them all the way. We benefited, they benefited. So the valuation is not the sole thing to focus on. But to directly answer the question, should you work out your valuation before going to investors? I think when I go to visit a house, or I'm going to buy a house, I can only visit houses where I know I can afford them. Otherwise, it's too aspirational. I can't. Why am I wasting my time going to see a house I can't afford? So it's a bit of a touchy-feely thing. I do think that you should have a feeling for an acceptable range of valuation, but I think you should test it informally on a friendly angel or investor before you make yourself look stupid. Either way, something that's too low or something that's too high. My last thing I'd say, Hanadi, is the best time to raise money was last year. Valuations are coming down now, but I don't think if it's your first time, you should feel challenged by that. Very specifically, I'd say there were quite a few investments that I didn't make last year because I thought the valuations were too high. And for all sorts of reasons that you'll read in the papers and financial news, valuations of technology are coming down now, but that is not a threat to you if it's your first fundraising. It may just mean you raise it to more realistic valuation that gives you the breathing space not to have everybody on your neck demanding a huge increase next time. It's quite a complex subject, but all I do is plead with you to get a sense of reality about what the value is worth to people for their risk coming in, and their need to see at least 10 times a return over a sort of 6 to 10 year period.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Question for you, Muhunthan. How can first-time entrepreneurs prove that they are the right people to execute a business idea? Is it usually best that they hand over most of the control to someone more experienced, a proper a manager, and take a smaller role? If so, when is the right time to hand over to someone more experienced? I think you're the best person to reply to that.
The best time for me is about 3 years from now when we exit the company. I think there's 2 things. One of the things Nathan said earlier, which is really important, is if you're a super academic individual and you have a particular lab or technology, you may not be the best person to be the CEO and builder. That's quite clear. But if you're starting your company early, and this is our vision and our idea, we have to build this company ourselves. Now, we, Alessandro and myself, are doctors. We have certain transferable life skills. We do not have MBAs, but there are people around us in the ecosystem, on our board, business directors, various people that have the business know-how to get us through that. So from our point of view, we're really clear. We need to build this company at this early stage ourselves now until we sell it or someone kicks us off the board at some point. But for us, that's quite clear that going to investors, we have to find investors that believe in our ability to take this through to the next round and the round beyond that. And we're confident we can do that, but we need to find investors that believe that we can absolutely do that, which we can.
And Nathan, anything you'd like to? Great answer, Muhunthan. Nathan, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, since I'm not an investor in Qureight, I'd say that's a brilliant answer. Very politic. I would say I'm sounding a sort of shot across the bows against a sort of hubris that says because you invented something, you're the right person to run it. And so I think, Muhunthan, you answered it extremely well. But please go back to my first investment principle: is do you have the right team to deliver the business plan? And it might be that it's beneficial for you to have a non-exec or exec chairman who's been through the fundraising and exit process, and you haven't been yet, but you are the right first-time entrepreneur. You might need a CFO who's really, really good at managing cash flow tightly. You might need a chief commercial officer or sales and marketing director, whatever, who's the right person to go in and do deals. I love selling. I love marketing. Even though I'm a physicist, I love selling and marketing. It gets my really, really enjoy it. But a lot of technical people find it difficult to plan through complex business to business or business to consumer sales. And so having that advice around you can be really helpful. Muhunthan, just as you said from John Snyder, I often find with my investee companies, because I've done a lot of sort of high level complex B2B deals, it may be way out of my comfort zone. But actually I know enough about the sales process to be able to help an investee just with half an hour's coaching on a particular project. So yeah, it's team, not just you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that B2B story is right, that you'll have huge experience in that area, even if, for example, you didn't understand pharma. And I think just one point you said, we know some fantastic companies in Cambridge that are our size that are really successful, where the tech people have become the CEOs. We know others where the tech person has become the CSO or the CTO, and they've brought in really, really great CEOs and financial people to run the company.
Yeah, be humble is the key thing.
And I think having the ambition to scale a business, no one is trying to kick anybody out. Everybody has a role to play, and it's a team working together. As Stelios told you, I'm an avid rower, and everybody on the boat has a role to play, and it's an important role. Whatever seat you're in, whether you're coxing or rowing, your job is to get that boat moving as fast, as efficiently, as beautifully as possible. Great answer, Muhunthan and Nathan. I would like to move on to, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce it properly, to Agiles' question. What would be considered a proof of concept? And at what point does an investor have enough confidence in the actual product offering? So a question for you, I guess, Nathan.
Yeah, I'd simplify this and use the sort of technology readiness level or TRL scale. I think people are familiar enough with it now, originated by defense people, but used at places like European Space Agency and so on. Now, I guess, Muhunthan, it's also acceptable in medicine to talk about those. So I'd sort of start with that as the way I think it's acceptable enough now to use that as a basis for conversation with people. I'm a very early stage investor. I'm happy to invest in something that's right out of the lab, but equally don't try and fool me. So I want to, the investment will be appropriate to the level of technology readiness, basically. So no, Agiles, I'm happy to invest in something that is something that shows the concept. I guess in my case, I'd struggle with something lower than about TRL 4. So that would be a sort of lab benchtop prototype, something that shows that something works, more than just showing me a scientific principle that says it could work. I think up to about TRL 4 in my area of engineering, physical sciences, that should be being funded within the sort of research council funding and so on. There's lots of Innovate UK and other funding to take you from TRL 4 to 6 or 7.
So Nathan, sorry, I've got a little bit of background knowledge on some of the attendees. Agiles is not a tech entrepreneur. He runs a startup that is a wine business. So I think, maybe it's an offline conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, so I'm executive chairman of a wine business called Honest Grapes, which has been going for 7.5 years. And it's another example in how to learn about running a startup. It's for me to learn B2B, e-commerce, social media, and digital marketing. So it's been a great learning lesson for me. Agiles, send me a bottle and I'll tell you if the proof of concept is good.
Brilliant. I think he might do that. There is a great question, and could either of you take that? And I will add a little bit of spice if I'm allowed. Can either of you comment? So it's Jonathan Bolland who shared that. Can either of you comment on the potential changes in operating model brought about by choosing a VC or another institutional investor versus having private investors. So either of you, who wants to go first? Angel investors versus vulture investors. Sorry, venture capitalists.
I'll give you a very quick answer because we're early into this, but they are different in terms of how do I say this, expectation, but also due governance and process. Angel investors are very diligent, but they may not come to all your board meetings. They may not want the same level of scrutiny. Whereas our venture capital investors, understandably, who put in a lot more money, have a very clear due process that we have to see through with board minutes and meetings and executive actions and a framework that needs to be done. So from my point of view, that's the main sort of difference in what they expect as you run the company.
Nathan?
Yeah, it's another sort of seemingly simple question that's actually quite complex. The natural angel investment for a private angel like me or a syndicate from Cambridge Angels or whatever would actually require less funding to get to exit because we're not investing as much as we do when we're pooled in a VC sense. And therefore, we would run it in a different way to a different exit point. And in broad terms, we might exit it at sort of tens of millions of turnover or valuation. It's very, very broad. You know, don't take these numbers as too meaningful. Whereas the VC funds I invest in, we're generally looking for businesses that will exit at valuations north of $250 million because the amount of money and the total capital requirement is much bigger for those businesses. But those are structural differences in your business model, which again, I'm going to keep coming back to my 6 principles. That's my 5th principle is what's the business model? How does that work? So actually, no, I think these are not about who your investors are. Those are human beings. Muhunthan's quite well said that VCs have to do it in a professional way because they're a general partner professionally managing money to which they're accountable to me as a limited partner. When it's my own money, I'm only accountable to myself. And so the amount of diligence I put in is great in a way because it's my money on the line, but it's less if I'm busy and I don't feel I can add so much. And so I tune my involvement. But actually, I'd say you need to bring it down to who the human beings are and how you're going to interact with them, but also what the right scale is and the funding arc for your business. So in a sense, is the operating model a consequence of the funding? No, I'd say the funding is a consequence of the operating model.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm going to take the next question to give you both a quick break. Another anonymous attendee. Hello, would you suggest someone networks when they have an established idea, or is it okay to be networking in the Cambridge ecosystem when you do not have an initial idea? Network anytime. Build your network, go and talk to people, pollinate, embrace it. You are incredibly lucky to be here in Cambridge. So go and network. And I see Nathan nodding, in agreement. So I think he's positively with me. And honestly, just go embrace it, meet people. You're very lucky to be here in Cambridge. So I hope that's answered that question. The next question is from Maxim. And it's for both of us, Nathan, you and I. As investors, do you expect startups to invest in to follow any particular framework or methodology, or you rather trust them to choose what's best for them? So is there life beyond the lean startup, Nathan? Do you want to go for that?
To be honest, I think it's probably going to sound bad being on a Judge Business School thing, but I think doing an MBA, having a structured approach is very helpful, but real life isn't about running a business by a textbook. So it's about how you use the principles in business. So yes, I'm a great believer and a great advocate of having a strong sense of planning, of structure, and of business models. But I'm also a great believer in having a strong business ethos, a set of personal and corporate ethics, which aren't written down in a textbook, about how I want to run a business or how I want to be involved in a business. But to straightforwardly answer your question, Maxim, no, I don't expect people to follow a model. If I'm advising or I'm asked to give feedback, I might guide people towards a way of thinking about things. But I wouldn't necessarily get a textbook out to say it.
Thank you, Nathan. So, Maxim, if I may add to Nathan's, I fully agree with him about processes. For me, MBA stands for Management by Accident. So, you know everything until you don't know it. The lean startup model definitely does not work for deep tech companies. With deep tech companies, with science companies, as with IP-rich companies, oftentimes they're solving a problem that we don't know exists. They probably do not have a solution. So there's a lot of exploration. No particular framework to follow. I fully agree, and I can't nod enough about what Nathan said about shared values, ethics, common vision. Really important, much more important than any methodology to start with, which is also something that's taught in a business school, by the way. So next question is for you, Muhunthan, which is from Priyanka. She would like to know, they would like to know if you could share your framework for choosing an investor and your DD on investors.
So the first bit, the process of choosing an investor is quite straightforward. Or looking for investors, you just need a piece of paper or an Excel sheet, and you need to start being very strategic and going and speaking to lots and lots of people. And we were lucky that we were strategic, but the investors came together, as I said at the end. In terms of your due diligence on investors, that's really important. So there are actually anonymous websites. I can find one and send you the link where investee companies anonymously rate investors, and it's very interesting to go and read up on your potential investors on those websites, and people are very honest. People who have been funded by them, people who haven't. So there are quite a few of these, but also talk to other people. So we specifically went and asked and were invited to go and speak to all the companies that the VCs had invested in, and so we met them, met the co-founders, asked them what they were like, and there's nothing as important as speaking to someone who was invested in by that company last year. The company or the angels go to board meetings, have dinners, have coffees, and you get to understand what people are like. So it's really, really important that you do your due diligence if you're fortunate enough to get investment before you actually accept the investment. And you might find out something really difficult or terrible and decide you don't want the investment, but it's really important that you find out before you make those decisions. As Nathan said, this is a partnership. This is about growing a company together with shared values. And if you don't share those values for whatever reason, then you're going to be in trouble over the next 18 months or so.
So Muhunthan, could you send me that link? I want
I'll
to say what people
find
are
it. I'll see if you're on that. I'll send you the link. It's quite eye-opening.
So the last question we're going to take from the audience, and I'm sorry we were not able to answer all of the questions, is from Joanna. Joanna is asking if you could suggest possible ways to raise money by solo entrepreneurs or solo founders. So Nathan, let me rephrase this. Do you invest in sole founders?
Oh gosh, I've got to admit that I don't really, and I don't really invest in husbands and wife or sort of partner teams. I said one of my investee companies is just going in the process of going bust, unfortunately. You just learn again and again that you can't mix these things. If I'm an investor in the business and I'm not the family, then if there's a problem with the family, it's like all mixed up. And you need to understand that as a private investor, I'm very strictly after financial return, but I also want to do good in the world with the money I've made from working hard. So it's a human process, not just a financial process, but there are some processes I just can't be part of. I think of company as like a solo founder is like a pogo stick. 2 founders are like a ladder. You need 3 founders to make a stool that's stable. And I think it's a mix of skills you need in a founding team. Generally starts better with 3 people. So my advice to you, Joanna, not knowing you, sorry, so I don't know the idea you're working on, is we haven't spoken about accelerators or incubators at all this evening, but why don't you try going to one of the accelerator programs and find another couple of people to work with on your idea, balance up the skills, make a stronger team.
So Joanna, I just like Nathan, actually got shot at a Cambridge Angels meeting for saying that I didn't invest in husband and wife teams. So no husband and wife teams, no brothers and sisters, no father and son, no mother and son. I mean, it's fully agree. And one of my principles is not to invest in solo founders. Having said that, there are always exceptions that confirm the rule. And in my angel investor portfolio, I have made 2 investments in solo founders. One that I am still regretting 5 years in. And the second, well, to be fair, when I invested, it wasn't a solo founder. They were a great team. And then one couldn't live with the other and left. So, but when I invested, it was not a solo founder. And the other one actually closed on Valentine's Day, yesterday. And it's a solo founder, an amazing, incredibly impressive woman who has surrounded herself with an amazing team, who's building a great board, a really incredible. So exceptions do come by. I can think of Tim Gilliams, who started alone, but found a great co-founder down the journey, and they've built together Helix. And this amazing woman who just closed $500,000 seed round on Monday didn't get a co-founder, but has an amazing team of investors and an amazing team around her, and is building a great board. And is on an impactful mission. So exceptions do happen. I've been bombarded with messages saying that I am a bad chair and I've let the conversations overrun and I'm taking time away from everyone. So I apologize for not sharing this efficiently. We have basically overrun by 5 minutes. It's this time of the evening where I need to thank first of all, Claire Bannister and the team at The Judge for organizing this event so professionally, so well, and for giving their time, because they are giving their time after hours. Thank you very much, Claire and team. And if we were in the room, I would ask you all to clap so you can virtually clap for Claire and the team. I would like to thank you as an audience for being so interactive and for throwing so many interesting questions to us. A huge warm thank you to the audience and to the amazing questions that we've had this evening. Muhunthan and Nathan, thank you both for your honesty, for your very sound advice, and for all of the nuggets of information that you've shared with everyone. What I have taken I've taken a lot from this panel, but just very shortly, because I know I am standing between you and a glass of wine. If you want to have a response from Nathan, do not cold call him, send him some wine. He might actually, give you an answer. Do not cold call investors. Do not waste your time, and check their investment criteria before you contact them. One of my favorite sayings is, in the early stage, even at seed, valuation is in the eyes of the beholder. It's how much someone is ready to pay for your business, or for having the pleasure and the privilege of sharing the risk with you and buying into your dream and your vision. So valuation is in the eyes of the beholder. And valuation is only one term. If your investor really believes in you as a founding team, if they really believe in the dream, the vision, and they agree with you on the valuation, they will make up for it in the terms. They will make you pay any down round coming down the line. So be careful not to antagonize your investor by negotiating on the wrong thing. Focus on not just the money, but also what your investors can bring and what they can bring alongside on the table. There is so much more than the money, and not all money is equal. There is so much more that I could tell you, but I'm getting bombarded. I'm going to stop here. Thank you to the team, thank you to the panelists, and thank you to the audience. And do join the next Enterprise Tuesday, next Tuesday, which is Pitch It. And I think Olivia is sharing the link. Do learn from how amazing, or the mistakes of the people pitching on the night. It's a great event. I've seen it many a times before. Thank you all. Have a lovely evening, and very much looking forward to that bottle of wine that you're going to send me to, not just to Nathan. Have a lovely evening. Take care. Bye.